The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council building shook as Ambassador Keltivor's desperate voice crackled through the speakers. His reptilian face was covered in green blood, and behind him, fires raged across his once beautiful homeworld. The camera shook violently as explosions rocked the ground beneath his feet. "Council members, this is our final transmission," Keltivor gasped, his breathing heavy and labored. "The Void Swarm has broken through our last defense grid. They're consuming everything. Our children, our elders, our very essence is being devoured by these creatures." The alien diplomats in the chamber watched in horror as dark, writhing tentacles appeared in the background of the transmission. These weren't ordinary war machines or soldiers. The Void Swarm was something far worse, a living nightmare that consumed entire civilizations and absorbed their knowledge, their memories, their very souls into its collective consciousness. 15 star systems have fallen in just 6 months, Keltivar continued, his voice breaking with emotion. The Andromedan Defense Force was obliterated in 3 days. The mighty Centauri fleet lasted barely a week. Nothing we throw at them even slows them down. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can develop new ones. A terrible screeching sound filled the transmission as one of the swarm creatures appeared behind the ambassador. Its form was indescribable, part machine, part organic horror, with thousands of tiny mouths that whispered the dying words of its victims. Keltivar didn't even turn around as the thing approached him. "Tell my mate I fought with honor," he whispered into the camera. "Tell our younglings that their father chose to stand rather than flee, and tell the council ... His words were cut short as the creature enveloped him. The transmission dissolved into static, leaving the chamber in deathly silence. For several long moments, nobody spoke. The representatives from dozens of different worlds sat frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. The Void Swarm wasn't just another enemy, it was extinction itself, creeping across the galaxy like a disease. Counselor Veltara rose slowly from her crystalline seat. Her blue skin normally glowed with a soft, peaceful light, but now it flickered, with rapid fear patterns that made her look like a broken neon sign. As one of the oldest members of the Council, she had lived through 3 major galactic wars, countless smaller conflicts, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. But she had never seen anything like this. "Fellow beings," she began, her voice trembling, despite her attempts to remain calm, "we have witnessed the death of the Kelveran system. Ambassador Keltivar and his people are gone, consumed by an enemy that grows stronger with each world it devours. Our combined fleets have proven useless against this threat." Murmurs of despair rippled through the chamber. The Tyrellian representative, a massive insectoid creature, clicked his mandibles nervously. The delicate, flower-like petalons swayed in their environmental suits, releasing pheromones of pure terror. Even the normally stoic granite lords seemed shaken, their rocky faces showing cracks of worry. Veltara raised her hand for silence. "There is one option remaining to us. One final card we can play, but it comes with risks that may be greater than the swarm itself." She paused, looking around the chamber at faces filled with desperate hope. "I invoke Emergency Protocol 847. We must contact the humans." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Half the chamber erupted in panicked chatter, while the other half fell into stunned silence. Protocol 847 was legendary. A last resort option that had been written into the Galactic Constitution 3 centuries ago, but never used. It was created after humanity had demonstrated military capabilities so terrifying that even their closest allies had begged them to leave known space. The stories were still told in whispers across the galaxy. How humans had ended the brutal Centauri rebellion, not through superior numbers or advanced technology, but through pure, calculated ruthlessness that made hardened warriors weep. How they had developed weapons so devastating that the mere threat of their use had prevented wars for generations. How they had voluntarily exiled themselves to the galaxy's outer rim when other species began to fear them more than their enemies. "Cannot be serious," hissed the Serpentine ambassador, his scales reflecting his shock in shifting colors. "The humans are monsters. They were banned from civilized space for good reason. They were not banned, Veltara corrected firmly. They chose to leave when they realized their methods frightened us. But their offer of assistance in truly desperate times still stands. This is that time. The debate that followed was fierce, but brief. Every species present knew the stories of human warfare. But they also knew that conventional methods had failed completely against the Void Swarm. As reports continued to pour in of entire sectors going dark, the choice became clear. The vote was unanimous. The bridge of the battleship Iron Thunder was darker than most alien vessels would find comfortable. Humans had always preferred the shadows, and Admiral Jake Morrison was no exception. He stood before the massive tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of star charts that showed the Void Swarm's relentless advance across the galaxy. When the emergency transmission from the Galactic Council arrived, Morrison didn't show any surprise. He had been expecting this call for years, maybe even decades. The message played out on the main screen, showing the desperate alien diplomats pleading for humanity's help against an enemy they couldn't defeat. Around the bridge, his crew exchanged meaningful glances. These weren't fresh-faced recruits or peacetime officers. Every person on the Iron Thunder was a veteran of conflicts the galaxy had never heard about. Wars fought in the empty spaces between stars, against threats that would have made the councils. Nightmares seemed like pleasant dreams. Commander Lisa Parker stepped up beside the Admiral, her tactical tablet showing incoming data streams. "Sir, we're receiving identical requests across all our hidden networks. The 2nd Deep Strike Fleet reports they're ready. The Ghost Squadron commanders are asking for deployment orders. Even the Blackout Division is coming online." "Sit!" Nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the display that showed the true scope of humanity's military presence. The galaxy thought humans had maybe a few hundred patrol ships scattered across the Outer Rim. They believed humanity had accepted exile and lived quiet lives on frontier worlds. Farming and mining like any other peaceful species, they were wrong. For 3 centuries, humanity had been building in the darkness between stars. Not the kind of ships the galaxy was familiar with. Sleek, efficient vessels designed for exploration and trade. No, humans had been constructing something far more dangerous. War machines that existed for one purpose only: to kill things that couldn't be killed by conventional means. The tactical display shifted, showing the real human fleet deployment. Thousands of vessels hidden in asteroid fields, camouflaged among dead worlds, and lurking in the cold void where no sensors could find them. Battleships the size of small cities, bristling with weapons that violated every treaty humanity had ever signed. Carriers that could launch fighter squadrons numbering in the thousands. Stranger Things vessels whose purposes were classified so deeply that even most human commanders didn't know what they were designed to do. "The Council thinks they're calling for help from a minor military power," Morrison said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "They have no idea what they've actually awakened." Parker pulled up another screen showing weapon specifications that would have terrified any alien observer. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Energy weapons that could boil away entire atmospheres. In the classified projects, the ones that pushed the boundaries of physics itself and had made human scientists question whether they had gone too far. "All fleet commanders are reporting ready status," Parker continued. "The Reaper Squadron wants to know if they're cleared to use the new gravitational weapons. Admiral Thompson on the Nemesis is asking about deployment of the quantum disruption. Torpedoes. And sir," she paused, her voice dropping to barely a whisper, "the Prometheus group is requesting permission to activate the Extinction Protocol weapons." Morrison was quiet for a long moment, considering options that could reshape the galaxy itself. The Extinction Protocol represented humanity's darkest military secrets, weapons, so devastating that their very existence was known only to a handful of people. They had been developed not to fight aliens, but to face threats that could potentially end all life in the universe. The Void Swarm qualified. "Signal all commanders," Morrison finally ordered, his voice carrying across the bridge with deadly calm. "Operation Darkstorm is authorized. It's full deployment, no restrictions. And tell the Prometheus group," paused, weighing his words carefully. Tell them they have permission to use whatever force they deem necessary. The bridge crew began implementing orders that would mobilize the largest human military force in history. But this wasn't like the old wars against other species. This time, humanity wasn't fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. They were fighting for survival itself, and that meant all the rules were off. Sir Parker said quietly, "The galaxy is going to learn what we really are. Once we deploy these weapons, once they see what we've been building all these years, they'll never look at humans the same way again." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Good. Maybe this time they'll remember why they were afraid of us in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, that fear will keep them alive long. Enough for us to save them all. The first warning came from the deep space monitoring stations scattered throughout the outer galaxy. Sensor operators who had been tracking routine cargo shipments and minor patrol vessels suddenly found their instruments going crazy. Gravitational. Readings were spiking across multiple star systems simultaneously, indicating something massive was about to emerge from hyperspace. On the Council observation ship, Harmony's Light, Chief Sensor Officer Thelvac stared at his displays in confusion. His 4 eyes, evolved to see across multiple spectrums, couldn't make sense of what the instruments were showing him. The readings suggested that dozens of massive objects were preparing to drop out of hyperspace, but that was impossible. Largest human settlements barely had enough ships to defend a single world. "This must be sensor malfunction," he muttered to his assistant, tapping the controls with his tentacles. "Run full diagnostics on all arrays. These readings are showing fleet formations larger than our entire navy." But the diagnostics came back clean. Sensors were working perfectly. Whatever was coming was real, and it was bigger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The first ships began appearing near the dead system of Kronos 7, where the Void Swarm had consumed an entire civilization just weeks before. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear as something forced its way through the barriers between dimensions. What emerged first looked like a mountain of black metal and ceramic armor, bristling with weapon systems that the Council's databases couldn't even identify. The Harmony's Light shook as gravitational waves washed over it. Captain Zorthic, veteran of dozens of space battles, gripped his command chair as his ship was buffeted by forces that shouldn't exist in normal space. "What in the name of the ancient gods is that thing?" he whispered. His tactical officer was frantically working her controls, trying to get accurate size measurements. "Captain, the computer keeps rejecting the scan results, showing this single vessel as being over 40 kilometers long and 15 kilometers wide. That can't be right. Nothing that large could possibly maintain structural integrity or maneuver in combat, but the measurements were correct. The human dreadnought that had just emerged was indeed the size of a small city, its hull scarred and blackened from countless battles in the dark spaces between stars. Along its sides, weapon ports open to reveal cannons that could level entire metropolitan areas with single shots. This wasn't just a warship, it was a mobile fortress designed to fight enemies that regular fleets couldn't even scratch, and it wasn't alone. More ships began emerging across the system, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Each one was larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Council's military databases. Massive carriers that could launch fighter squadrons numbering in the tens of thousands. Cruisers that outgunned most alien battleships, destroyers that moved through space like hunting predators, or hulls designed for stealth and sudden. Overwhelming violence, Captain Zorthic watched his tactical display fill with contact markers until the screen looked like a solid wall of red dots. His computer systems, designed to track the movements of entire enemy fleets, simply gave up trying to count individual vessels. The display just showed a single message: contact count exceeds maximum display parameters. "By the Eternal," Void whispered his communications officer, "how many ships do the humans have? This is impossible." "Our intelligence reports said they had maybe 300 vessels total, scattered across 50 systems." The answer came as more fleets began appearing in neighboring systems. The humans weren't deploying one massive armada, they were deploying multiple massive armadas simultaneously. Each fleet that emerged was larger than the combined navies of the Council's 5 most powerful member species, but the most disturbing ships were the ones that appeared at the center of each formation. These vessels didn't look like traditional spacecraft at all. They seemed to bend light around themselves, creating distortions that made them appear as holes in space itself. The Council's sensors couldn't get solid readings on them, couldn't determine their size or configuration or armament. They just registered as empty spaces where something should be, but wasn't. "Captain," the tactical officer said in a shaking voice, "I'm detecting energy readings from those central vessels that are off the charts. They're generating more power than our entire space station. What kind of weapons could they possibly be carrying?" Before anyone could answer, the human fleet began deploying its arsenal. Weapon systems that violated every treaty and convention of civilized warfare began powering up. The first to activate were the kinetic bombardment platforms, massive railguns that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. These weren't designed to fight other ships. They were designed to crack planets open like eggs. Next came the quantum disruption torpedoes, weapons that existed more in theory than in practice for most species. These devices didn't just explode, they temporarily altered the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas, creating zones where matter itself became unstable. The Council had banned research into such weapons centuries ago, declaring them too dangerous for any civilized species to possess. And finally, the humans revealed their most terrifying creations, the Earth-class world destroyers. These were weapons that humanity had publicly sworn never to build after demonstrating their prototypes 3 centuries ago. Yet here they were, mounted on ships that shouldn't exist, ready to unleash forces that could sterilize entire solar systems. The message was clear. Humanity hadn't just been hiding their true military strength. They had been preparing for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Void Swarm had existed for millions of years, consuming civilizations across countless galaxies. In all that time, it had never encountered anything like what happened at the mining colony of New Perth. When the Swarm's scout vessels arrived, expecting to find another helpless population fleeing in panic, they instead found something that defied their ancient understanding of how prey behaved. The humans weren't running. The colony's 10,000 inhabitants were still there, going about their daily routines as if nothing was wrong. The mining equipment continued operating, the schools were still in session, and the spaceports showed normal traffic patterns. To the Swarm's collective consciousness, this looked like a perfect feeding opportunity. Large population that hadn't even realized the danger they were in. The first wave of Swarm bioships descended toward the planet's surface. They're writhing, tentacles and gnashing mouths ready to begin the feeding process. These creatures were living nightmares, each one the size of a city block, capable of consuming thousands of people in minutes while absorbing their memories and knowledge into the collective hive mind. But as they entered the planet's atmosphere, something went terribly wrong. The mining equipment that had seemed so normal suddenly revealed its true nature. Those weren't excavation lasers, they were military-grade energy weapons, disguised and repurposed for a very different kind of mining. The innocent-looking cargo containers scattered across the colony's surface opened up to reveal missile batteries and kinetic launchers. Even the school buildings split apart, transforming into fortified bunkers bristling with anti-aircraft guns. The entire colony was a trap, designed and built by human military engineers who understood exactly how the Swarm operated. Every building, every vehicle, every piece of infrastructure had been carefully positioned to create overlapping fields of fire that would incinerate anything trying to land and feed the Swarm creatures that had descended expecting an easy meal. Instead, found themselves caught in a hellstorm of weapons fire that tore their bioorganic hulls apart faster than their regeneration systems could repair the damage. For the first time in their existence, Swarm entities experienced something completely alien to their nature. They were being hunted. Admiral Morrison watched the battle unfold from the bridge of his command ship, hidden in the asteroid belt at the system's edge. His tactical display showed the Swarm's confusion as more of their vessels were destroyed, trying to reach what should have been defenseless prey. The creatures' behavior patterns, evolved over millions of years of easy conquest, were completely unprepared for this kind of resistance. Phase 2, Morrison ordered quietly. Begin the herding operation. Human ships that had been lurking invisibly throughout the system suddenly powered up their engines and revealed themselves. But instead of engaging the swarm directly, they began a complex dance of positioning and movement designed to push the alien creatures exactly where the humans wanted them to go. The swarm, still operating on instincts that told them to seek out large populations to consume, found themselves being subtly guided toward the system's gas giant. What they didn't know was that human engineers had spent months turning that planet into the galaxy's largest bomb. The gas giant's atmosphere had been seeded with experimental compounds that would react violently with the swarm's bio-signatures. As thousands of swarm vessels gathered around the planet, preparing for what they thought would be a feeding frenzy. On the orbital stations, Morrison gave the final order: detonate. The entire gas giant exploded in a chain reaction that could be seen from neighboring star systems. The swarm vessels caught in the blast were vaporized instantly, their remains scattered across space as a warning to the rest of the hive mind. But the humans weren't finished. What came next was something that no species in the galaxy had ever attempted: a direct attack on the swarm's collective consciousness itself. Human ships began broadcasting strange signals across subspace frequencies. Messages that carried concepts completely foreign to the hive mind: individual identity, personal fear, the desire for self-preservation over collective survival. These ideas, normal to most species, were like poison to a consciousness that had existed as a unified whole for eons. The psychological warfare was devastating. Swarm vessels began breaking formation as individual creatures experienced doubt for the first time in their existence. Some tried to flee from battles they might lose, while others hesitated to sacrifice themselves for the collective good. The hive mind, built on absolute unity of purpose, started tearing itself apart as conflicting thoughts and emotions spread like a virus through its neural networks. Morrison's strategy was working exactly as planned. Don't just destroy them, he had told his commanders. Make them afraid to exist. Make them question everything they think they know about themselves. Fear is contagious, and we're going to infect their entire species with it. The hunt continued across dozens of star systems, with human forces always staying one step ahead of the swarm's attempts to adapt. Every time the creatures learned to counter one tactic, the humans revealed another, more terrifying approach. They turned entire solar systems into weapons, used civilian populations as bait for massive ambushes, and deployed psychological warfare techniques that drove the collective consciousness toward madness. For the first time in its ancient existence, the Void Swarm was learning what it felt like to be prey. The screaming started in the Andromeda sector and spread across subspace like ripples in a pond. Every species with the ability to monitor deep space communications heard it. The death cry of the last Void Swarm hive as human weapons tore it apart at the molecular level. Sound was unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. A psychic wail that made hardened warriors cover their ears and weep. On monitoring stations throughout civilized space, alien observers watched their instruments record the final moments of an entity that had terrorized the galaxy for months. The massive bioship, easily the size of a small moon, had come apart as human quantum weapons destabilized its very existence. Its dying thoughts, broadcast across every frequency, spoke of confusion and terror as it experienced individual death for the first time in millions of years of collective consciousness. For months. That's all it had taken for humanity to completely eliminate a threat that had consumed 15 star systems and defeated every conventional military force sent against it. For months to hunt down and destroy every last trace of an enemy that most species had considered unstoppable. But as the celebration began across the galaxy, the surviving members of the Galactic Council found themselves facing a new and perhaps more terrifying reality. In saving them from the Void Swarm, humanity had revealed capabilities that challenged every assumption about the balance of power in known space. The Council's emergency session was held in a heavily shielded chamber, protected from any possible human surveillance. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in hushed groups, their voices barely above whispers as they discussed what they had witnessed over the past 4 months. They turned entire star systems into weapons, reported Admiral Kelthor of the Centauri Defense Force, his usually steady voice shaking with barely controlled fear. They didn't just fight the swarm, they orchestrated its destruction with precision that suggests they've been planning for this kind of war for decades. The evidence was overwhelming and deeply disturbing. Human forces had demonstrated technologies that violated every treaty of civilized warfare. Weapons that could crack planets like eggs. Energy systems that drew power directly from stars themselves. And most frightening of all, the ability to wage psychological warfare against a hive mind, something that should have been theoretically impossible. The quantum disruption torpedoes alone represent a level of scientific advancement that puts them centuries ahead of our best research, added Dr. Velinara, the Council's chief technology advisor. But it's not just their weapons. It's their tactics, their strategy, their complete understanding of warfare on a scale we never imagined possible. The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the same terrifying question: if humanity could do this to the Void Swarm, what could they do to the rest of the galaxy? The answer came in Admiral Morrison's final report. It's transmitted simultaneously to every major government and military installation in civilized space. The message was brief, professional, and carried undertones that made experienced diplomats break out in cold sweat. To the Galactic Council and all member species, Morrison's voice echoed through the chamber, calm and measured despite the magnitude of what he was reporting. The Void Swarm threat has been eliminated in its entirety. All hive nodes, bioships, and trace organisms have been located and destroyed. The affected star systems have been cleared of contamination and are safe for recodify efforts. The first part of the message sounded like standard military reporting. It was what came next that sent chills through every alien listener. Operation has successfully demonstrated humanity's commitment to galactic peace and our willingness to assist in crisis situations. We consider this action to have fully satisfied any outstanding obligations between humanity and the Council dating back to our voluntary exile 3 centuries ago. Counselor Velterra felt her blue skin flickering with fear patterns as she realized what Morrison was really saying. Humanity wasn't just reporting mission success, or declaring their independence from any authority the Council might have claimed over them. Our fleets will now be returning to human space, Morrison continued, his voice carrying a subtle but unmistakable warning. We trust that our demonstration of capability has been sufficient to ensure that such assistance will not be required again in the foreseeable future. Should the Council have any concerns about this decision, we remain open to diplomatic discussion. The silence that followed the transmission was deafening. Every alien in the chamber understood the subtext perfectly. Humanity had just politely informed the galaxy that they were now the dominant military power in known space, and any objections would be met with the same force that had eliminated the Void Swarm. But perhaps the most terrifying realization was what they hadn't seen throughout the entire campaign against the Swarm. Humanity had deployed weapons and tactics that seemed designed specifically for that enemy. The precision, the preparation, the perfect understanding of how to fight a hive mind. It all suggested that humans had been ready for this exact threat long before it appeared. What other enemies had they prepared for? What other weapons lay hidden in the darkness between stars, waiting for threats that the rest of the galaxy couldn't even imagine? The humans had spent 3 centuries in exile. Now it was clear they hadn't been hiding. They had been preparing. As the Council session ended and representatives returned to their homeworlds, one fact dominated every conversation. The galaxy had traded one existential threat for another. The Void Swarm was gone. But humanity had revealed itself as something equally dangerous, a species that had turned warfare into a precise science and possessed the power to reshape the balance of galactic civilization. The age of human exile was over. The age of human dominance had begun, whether the rest of the galaxy was ready for it or not.